If you're doing a no buy or low buy and want to take things to the next level, then keep watching because I'm going to show you how you can use a no buy challenge to double or even triple your savings in 1 year by using the frugal tips and money hacks that I'm sharing in this week's video. Let's dive in. Hi there, friend, and welcome to my channel. My name is Marissa, and this is A to Zen Life, where I share all of the best tips and ideas to help you simplify your way to a happier, richer, and better life. And since we just wrapped up February, that means it's time for a recap of all of the money that I saved and or spent in this month's episode of the Low-Buy Diaries. And I'll also be sharing some of the best money saving tips that I used and life lessons I picked up along the way. But even though it's called the Low-Buy Diaries, my family and I were actually doing a total no-spend challenge this month because it's kind of become an annual tradition here at the A to Zen Life channel to do a 1-month no-spend challenge that I call Frugal February. And even though this is the 4th year in a row that we've done a no-spend challenge together, I've got to say every single time we do this, I always walk away having learned so much. And I hope you do too. Now, just in case you missed last month's video, I will be sure and link it down in the description box below for you to check out because I do think that it's a good reference point that kind of sets the foundation for what I'm doing and implementing this year. And there are also some really good tips and insights that I shared in that video that I think a lot of you really enjoyed. And just in case you want to jump around, here are all of the timestamps for the topics that I'm going to be discussing in this week's video. And first of all, I want to start by sharing the rules and exceptions that I set for this 1-month no-buy challenge because they are a little bit different than the rules that I set for our low-buy year. And then I also want to share some of my favorite money-saving tips and hacks and give you some concrete examples of how we use them to save money this month. And then after that, I'm going to be sharing how much I saved this month, which was a number that was even more shocking than the amount I saved last month, if I do say so myself. And then I'll also be touching on how much I did end up spending on non-essential items when I had to activate exceptions. And then I'll close the video by answering some of your biggest no-buy and low-buy questions and by responding to some comments and criticisms that I got in last week's video. So let's start by diving into my list of rules and exceptions that I set at the beginning of this no-buy month. And I find this really, really helpful to set rules and exceptions for people because it gives you boundaries for what you can and can't spend your money on, which is really, really helpful for most people, especially if you're not used to putting limitations on your spending. So I wrote this list out on my phone so that I could always have it on hand whenever I went out in case I needed to bring it up and remind myself of the rules and exceptions that I had set in case I was feeling a little spendy. So kicking things off with the rules, one of the rules that we set was no dining out this month. And that is something that is different than the rules that we set for our low buy year, because for our low buy year, we set the rule that we are allowed to eat out once per week. But for this no spend month, we always make sure to cut out dining out completely. And the second rule that I set was that I'm not allowed to buy any new home decor, which is also different than the rules and exceptions that I've set for our low buy. Because for my low buy year, I have set the exception that I'm allowed to do some projects that I wasn't able to finish last year because we did move into a new home and there were some projects that I didn't get around to doing. But for this month, I wasn't allowed to spend anything in the home decor or home project category. I also set a rule that we were not allowed to buy any new clothes or makeup, and obviously the makeup applies to me, but the new clothes applies to the whole family, and that was fine. And also another rule was that we were not allowed to buy any beer, wine, or other alcohol. And this is something that I talked about in my previous video, which is that my husband and I decided to challenge ourselves not just to a dry January, but to a dry 90-day challenge where we're not drinking any alcohol. So we continued that rule still for the month of February. And then also no new books, toys, or games. And we talked to our kids in advance about this and they were totally on board. And then as far as the exceptions that we set for our no buy month, we said that it would be okay to spend money in the case of an emergency or for health medications or things like doctor's visits, which I think those two kind of go together. And that it's also okay for us to spend money on necessities such as bills, utilities, etc., which is pretty standard for no buy months and no buy years because those are things that you need to pay regardless. I also set the exception that it would be okay to replace things if they were to break or run out, such as if we ran out of shampoo or conditioner and we didn't have the kind that we needed that we could substitute for that. In that case, it would be okay for us to buy replacements. And then I also set an exception that it would be okay for us to spend on pre-planned appointments. So my husband had a pre-scheduled haircut, for example, but he did end up canceling that, which was funny. But it would have been okay had he chosen to spend money on that. And then another exception that I always set is that it's okay for us to spend money on things like holidays or birthday parties or birthday gifts for friends, because one of the things that we're trying to save money for is so that we can have more experiences and more fun and social connections. And we don't want to alienate our friends by saying that we can't go to their house or their birthday party, especially when we've already planned for those things in advance. Like, for example, we had neighbors who had invited us over to their house for lunch one day, and we were already planning to go to their house and bring something for that, which we did, and I'll talk about in a moment. So what I want to do now is to dive into some of the money saving tips and hacks that we used this month, starting with number one, which is so essential for any low buy or no buy, and that is to look for free ways to have fun. I think one of the biggest reasons that a lot of people fail their low buy or no buy challenges is they don't really know how to have fun without spending money. So some of the things that we did this month where we had fun without having to spend money was we had a major snowstorm where school was even canceled. It was that bad. And when we had that snowstorm, we called up a friend and we asked them if they wanted to go sledding with us. So we went with that friend and her son, and the boys went sledding together. And we were there for hours. We had tons of fun. And we also ended up taking a walk around the park while we were there and playing on the playground equipment in the snow, which was really fun. And we saw some ducks that were also having fun swimming in the little creek there. And we sat there for quite a while watching the ducks. I also went to the library several times. In fact, that's something that we pretty much do every single week. And we borrow books or games or things from there. And I just can't reiterate enough how fantastic of a resource your local library is for your no buy or low buy challenge, because there are just so many things that you can borrow there. They have all of the latest and most popular movies for both adults and kids. And I mean, a lot of these are so new that they haven't even dropped on streaming services yet. But at your local library, you can find them and be first in line to watch. Our local library even has something called binge bags, which are bags that are full of related videos that you can watch in a long period of time, like, say, the Narnia movies or the Harry Potter movies. And I want to find the absolute genius who put this dinner and a movie kiosk together in our local library and shake their hand, because they did such a fantastic job of pairing popular movies along with cookbooks that contain recipes that would either be related to or inspired by recipes or themes that were in each of those movies. And come on, you need to either be an Einstein level genius or an absolute madman to pair a recipe book about onions with a movie like Shrek, and then take Home Alone and pair it with a pizza cookbook. I mean, this is just like mwah, chef's kiss level. And I know that some people don't like to borrow books from the library because they feel like they want to own a physical copy of that book themselves. But in my opinion, it's a really good idea to try to borrow that book from the library and see if you like it first before you go ahead and buy it, because this is how much money I saved borrowing books from the library that I ended up abandoning completely and not even finishing, which is honestly so frustrating when you pay for a book and then you can't even make it through it. Because I was doing a no spend month, I really wanted to read some books that were based around personal finance and frugality and saving money. But unfortunately, a lot of the books that I borrowed just really didn't hit home for me. None of the information was really new. And so I ended up not finishing them. And then also when I'm doing a no spend challenge and I'm doing a lot of cooking from home and looking for recipe inspiration, I'll go to the library and I'll borrow a bunch of cookbooks and see what I like in there. And I always come home with a ton of cookbooks, and I never have enough time to try every recipe in all of them, obviously. But even if I find one or two recipes that I can add to my repertoire, that is so worth it to me, but I don't need to spend the money to buy an entire cookbook. And then another thing that we did is we had some coupons from previous birthday parties that we'd gone to for us to get 90 minutes of jumping free at a local trampoline park. So one of the days I took the boys to go jump at the trampoline park, and we had a ton of fun there. And I also took some snacks along with me so that I wouldn't have to pay for snacks because I knew that my kids were going to get hungry. So planning ahead. I also made an entire video of no spend activities to get you through your low buy or no buy challenge without having to spend money. And I'll be sure to link that up here as well as the description box below, as well as the free dopamine menu that talks about and lists out all of these no spend challenge activities that you can use to still have fun without having to spend money. Another thing we did to save money this month is we gave the boys haircuts at home because they were in dire need of some trimming and starting to look a little bit like cavemen. This is something that we've been doing for many, many years now, and it saved us hundreds of dollars on kids' haircuts. And in our area currently, it's about $25 per child per haircut. So because we have two boys, that would be $50 each time we would take them to get their haircut. And so by doing these haircuts at home, we're able to save a significant amount of money considering they need their haircut several times a year. So what we do is my husband usually does the trimming with his electric trimmer. And because Dee Dee's hair is thicker and more like my husband can usually get it done using just the trimmer only. But because Guga's hair is a little bit thinner and more like mine, my husband does the trimming around the bottom, and then I'll usually go and I'll finish off the top with a pair of scissors. We've gotten so many compliments on the boys' haircuts over the years and how cute they look, and people are always amazed when they hear that we actually do the haircuts. And this is something that I learned to do just by watching videos on YouTube and by investing in a cheap hair cutting kit and cape with a duster so that we can brush the hair off when they're done, and then they just go take a shower and clean up and they're good to go. We also saved quite a bit of money this month by not going out to eat, and this was probably the hardest thing for all of us, but especially the kids, because they don't really ask for new toys or books or games that often, but they missed eating out a lot. And I think this is where my no spend challenge printable comes in really, really handy because I could refer them to check the printable and see how many days we had left until our no buy month was over, because it kind of gives them a visual reference point instead of just having this arbitrary idea of, oh, we have to wait a month. And that way they would be able to keep their eyes on the prize and know how much longer they had until the no buy month was finished. It really makes it concrete for them, and it's kind of fun and gives them something to look forward to, just like adults enjoy checking boxes when they get something on their to-do list done. I found that my kids really like coloring in the days once we've made it through without spending money. And we also promised them that when our no-buy month was over, we would all go out to eat Korean food afterwards and get some ice cream. The fourth thing that I did this month was I really worked hard to meal plan and reduce how much money we were spending on groceries. And because I was working really hard to find budget friendly recipes and cut costs on groceries, we ended up saving an extra $300 on groceries compared to the previous month. So, to give you an example of the kinds of foods that I would prepare and how I would reduce food waste and save money by repurposing leftovers in a way that's tasty and my kids want to keep eating, here is an example of a recipe that I made that is chicken thighs with a kind of lemon yogurt sauce. And I paired that with some rice and some green beans, and that recipe is always a hit with my family. And then what I'll do is I'll take however many chicken thighs we have for leftovers, and then the next day I'll usually put it with some pasta. So what I've done here is I've taken the leftover chicken thighs that we had from last night and I chopped them up. And what I'm going to do is I'm making some pasta and I'm going to cook it with the pasta and all of this yummy flavoring. And we're going to have that with a nice salad. And that will be our lunch. So here's the finished product, and I just top it off with a nice little sprinkle of some shredded Parmesan cheese on top. So that's how I take a handful of simple and extremely affordable ingredients and turn it into not just one, but two meals for my family. And not just meals, but meals that are tasty and enjoyable that I don't have to force my kids to sit down and eat. They are excited to come to the table and dig in. Now, I want to make a note here that typically when people cut back on eating out, they'll see their grocery budget increase to kind of compensate for that food that they're not eating when they're going out to restaurants or ordering takeout or whatever. But I think that ours didn't do that because February is a shorter month and maybe we had kind of stocked up towards the end of last month and that inventory kind of spilled over into February, which helped us. And then additionally, my husband also took two short business trips during this time. So not having a whole extra adult to feed many days out of the month definitely saved us money and meant that we had more leftovers. However, I will say that groceries are something that I don't really skimp on because it's one of our favorite things to spend money on and eat high quality foods. And I always buy organic milk, I buy organic cheese, I try to buy organic meats as often as possible and organic eggs. Although I will say that the egg shortage is starting to really hit us hard. And I actually noticed the last time that I went to the grocery store, they were limiting customers to one egg carton per customer. And I know the last time my husband went to Costco, they didn't even have eggs. So I'm wondering how many of you are also being affected by this egg shortage. So please drop me a comment below about this and let me know. Or if you're just generally seeing the cost of food going up and you'd like to see me make a video with tips on how to save money on groceries and still eat well. And then the last money hack that I wanted to share with you is that you can actually earn passive income on all of the money that you're saving during your no buy challenge by putting it in an HYSA. And so what I want to do is I want to go through how much I saved this month and how I'm going to be using an HYSA to double or even triple my savings during my low buy challenge. So what I want to do now is I want to go through this journal and share all of the things that I didn't spend money on this month. And just in case you haven't seen my previous videos, basically this is a journal that I have been using since the beginning of the year. And the things that I'm tracking in this journal include the date and the location of the impulse purchase temptation, any notes that I have about those purchases, as well as the price of each item so that I know how much I've saved at the end of the month by not making those purchases. So ironically, the very first day of February, I already had the impulse to spend money and I was on Instagram and I was just scrolling through and I happened to see this reel by someone called Your Rich BFF. She shares personal finance and money related videos, but what caught my eye was her adorable panda ear headband. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, that is so cute. I want one for myself. But then I reminded myself that I already have a headband that I like and that works perfectly well for me. And therefore, I didn't really need a new headband. And I was able to very quickly let go of that impulse, I would say. And I looked that product up on Amazon and found out that it's around $9.99. So I saved myself a quick 10 bucks by not giving in to that. And then on February 2nd, I was going into Mariano's, which is a grocery store, and I was going in to get some groceries, which was planned. But then as I was walking into the store, you have to pass the floral area where they have plants and flowers. And I saw and smelled these beautiful hyacinths. And hyacinths, whenever I smell them, always remind me of my grandfather who passed away the same year that my father died. And he had the most beautiful garden. He grew flowers, he grew vegetables, and I always remember how his garden smelled in the spring. And so anytime I smell the hyacinths, I immediately have all of these memories of my grandpa come flooding back, and I had a very strong impulse to buy these things. And here's an interesting fact for you. So our sense of smell is the one that's most deeply tied to our memories because the part of the brain that processes smell smell, which is called the olfactory bulb. It's directly linked to the parts of our brain that process and store memories. And that's why certain smells can trigger our memories and strong emotions. And that's definitely something that I had to work on healing and letting go of, because I used to be someone who would get very triggered by things like this. So I just reminded myself that I'm on a no-buy challenge and I didn't really need those hyacinths. So I was able to very quickly go past them and saved $6 on that. And then while I was there, I was also kind of considering replacing some ELF green color corrector. I had originally intended on replacing this once it ran out, but then when I really stopped and thought about it, I realized that this doesn't really add that much value to my makeup routine, and I have other concealers that do basically the same thing. So I don't really need this extra step of adding green color corrector to take the red out of my face. So I ended up skipping that and saved $4.49. On February 5th, I went out to grab the mail, and that's when I found this brochure that came in the mail for the Viking River and Ocean Cruises. So I started flipping through this, and they just make everything look so nice and so tempting and sound so fun. And I was immediately drawn into the pictures and the descriptions of the food and the places that you could go. And I was like, maybe we could use a cruise this year. And actually, travel is one of the things that we've made an exception for this year, but we've already planned where we want to go, and it doesn't include any cruises, no matter how tempting they might sound. This is probably one of the biggest impulse spends that I resisted this month, because the all-inclusive voyages start from, they say, $1,999 a month, but what they don't say is that that's the bare minimum, and that's the price for one person. And depending on what kind of accommodations you want and where you would go, it could end up costing you significantly more. Yeah, of course, the one that I like is the more expensive of them because it's going to the Mediterranean. And you can see here the price per person, depending on what kind of room you stay in, could run you anywhere from $6,500 all the way up to $20,000 per person. With all of these impulse spends, it's really tough to say whether I would or would not seriously consider spending money on these things. So what I end up writing down is the things that I feel a really strong pull or attraction to. But just because you feel a strong pull or attraction to something doesn't mean that you have to give into it. And I do know a lot of people who impulsively go on trips even when they can't afford them and they have to go into debt for them. But again, I just reminded myself that a cruise is not on our travel plans for this year. On February 6th, I was shopping for groceries and I walked by the soap area and I saw a selection of Harry Potter soaps that were in the men's section. And I love everything Harry Potter, so of course I was immediately drawn to that. But I just reminded myself that I actually hate bar soap, and it was men's soap anyway, and they only had Slytherin and Hufflepuff, which I didn't like the sense of, and I'm a Gryffindor through and through, so that was an easy pass on my part. And I saved $6.99 not buying that soap. On the 8th, I saw a vintage glass bonsai tree on Facebook Marketplace that kind of popped up in my notifications. And so on the 8th, I ended up resisting that glass vintage bonsai tree that I saw, which was such a work of art. And I can appreciate this from a creative and artistic standpoint. But I started thinking to myself, well, even if I bought this, where would I put it? And I didn't have a good answer for that. And also, it's not something that I was looking for. So I did pass that up and I saved $50. After passing up that vintage glass bonsai tree, there was a good long stretch where I didn't have any impulses to buy anything, I guess because I wasn't exposing myself to the temptation. But then on the 19th, I was on Instagram and I saw this toothbrush protector cover come up on my feed. And this is so funny because this is another one of those things that is so personal, which I think a lot of impulse spends are, because they just hit you right in that funny bone, except it's not a funny bone. It's like the spend money bone. And the reason I was attracted to this is because anytime I'm brushing my teeth in the bathroom, I always have my college roommate's voice echoing through my head and telling me that you have to watch out for the toilet mist whenever you flush and having that get on your toothbrush. So the solution that I have currently is we keep our toothbrushes in just a cup and we put those away in the cabinets, although not always, I will say. But when I saw that toothbrush protector, I thought that is just so cool and so functional and so aesthetic, and I was really, really tempted to buy it. However, I just reminded myself again that it's not a necessity and we already have a very practical and functional solution. So I was able to save myself $23.99. On February 21st, I was looking at some Asian recipes on Pinterest and trying to plan what we were going to eat for that week when some dishes that came up in the recommended underneath the recipes caught my eye. And I loved the colors and I loved that those dishes have like this little built-in sauce holder on one side. Of course, I would have had to get 4 because we have 4 members of the family and I'm not wanting the smaller size, I want the bigger size. So those would have been $39.80 each times 4, which was a total of $159.20. But I just reminded myself that we already have dishes that we use for our dumplings, and we also have some small containers that we use to put things like sauces in whenever we need, you know, dipping sauce for our dumplings or salsa, say, to the side of burritos. So it's not a necessity, and therefore I was able to pretty quickly pass that one up. And then on the 24th, I was looking at food on Instagram because apparently looking at food is my favorite hobby. And I found this recipe that I was interested in, and then I saw the creator using this blender that was so cute. But then I reminded myself that I already have a blender that is very practical, very functional. I can use it as a food processor. I can use it as a blender. I can use it to make small batches or large batches. So of course I don't need to be buying this new fancy blender just because it looks good. And I was able to save myself $119 by not giving in to that purchase. All right, so how much does all of that add up to? Can we get a drum roll, please? All in all, I saved a grand total of $2,279.66 in February with all of the impulse spending that I resisted, which means that between the $1,025.95 I saved in January, we're now up to $3,305.61 in total savings. However, we did end up having to activate some of our no-buy exceptions this month. So let's dive in to see how much I spent on non-essentials during our no-buy challenge this month. So on February 28th, I bought some cupcakes from a local grocery store. And the reason that I bought these cupcakes was because, like I said before, we were going for a lunch date over at our friend's house, and we didn't want to show up empty-handed. And their sons both have really serious nut allergies. And usually I would make my own dessert and bring it to a party. However, I was a little bit worried about cross-contamination with some of the desserts that I typically make that use things like cocoa or bits of chocolate because they can be cross-contaminated when they're processed in a factory that, you know, processes some of these other items. So to be extra, extra safe, I just went ahead and bought some allergy safe cupcakes, and I spent $7.18 on those. On the 13th, I realized that I totally dropped the ball and I completely forgot about Valentine's Day. So I had to scramble at the last minute to try to find something for my youngest son to take. So my youngest son is still in elementary school. My older son has now gone to middle school and no longer has to take things, but I still needed to get something for Didi. So what I was thinking of doing was I was thinking of buying some little packets of flower seeds that I could give to each of the kids that maybe they could sow in their yard or something. But then when I went to the grocery store, even though those flower packets were 40% off, at $3.39 each, that would have meant that it would still be $2.04 per kid. And since we have over 25 kids in our classroom, not even counting the teachers and aides, that would have been over $50 just to spend on Valentine's Day. So what we ended up doing was we ended up running to Walgreens and getting a pack of Valentine's Day cards that came with tattoos. And we were super excited because we got the very last Star Wars one, although we also did consider the Spider-Man, I have to say. So Didi was really excited to put those Valentine's cards together for his friends. And they also happened to be 20% off when I got them from the store. So altogether, I ended up spending a grand total of $3.88 on those Valentine's Day cards. Also on the 13th, my husband ran out of Tiger Balm, so he ran to the store to grab some. And if you're not familiar with Tiger Balm, it looks like this, and it's a Chinese ointment that can be used for all sorts of things like pain relief or dry skin. And so my husband's little jar ran out and he went and got a replacement for that. And remember, one of our exceptions was that we could replace things if they ran out. So that exception cost us $7.50. And then on the 17th, we had to go to the doctor for a minor health issue. And fun fact, we have never made it through a no spend challenge without having at least one medical or dental emergency. And I have to say, I'm really glad that this one was minor because the very first no spend challenge that we did, my husband was actually traveling out of the country and my son, this was when we were living in Germany, my son slipped and fell at the playground and bashed his face on the wood playground equipment, and he had this like huge crack in his gum that looked really, really bad. So not speaking German, because we had just recently moved there, I had to then try to figure out how I was going to get a taxi and find a dentist and do this emergency dentist visit. So that was fun. Like I said, luckily this was just a minor issue, but we did have to pay a copay. So we ended up spending $30 on that doctor visit. And then after the 17th, we didn't have any more exceptions that we had to activate for our no spend challenge. So all in all, we spent a total of $48.58 on these exceptions for our no buy month. So here is the final result of our no buy challenge, and you can see the days that we had to activate our exceptions and the days that we didn't spend money in green. And like I said, we spent $48.56 on activating those exceptions. So now that we've gone through what I spent and saved in the past month, what I wanted to do is dive into some comments and questions that I got in the last video where I was talking about our low buy challenge. The first of which is a comment from someone who said basically they don't have enough time to do something like this. And of course, I have to turn it sideways so that I can actually be able to read it. Okay, hold on. So this person said, "This is ridiculous. Just stop shopping until you have a necessity item. You'll see the difference at the end of the year when your bank balance has increased. I don't have enough time in the day to write down every item I thought of buying. That itself is a full-time job." And what I want to address about this comment is this person's claim that you can just stop spending money and only buy things that you absolutely need. But what we know about people who have shopping addiction or who struggle with overspending, they can really, really struggle to do this and say no to themselves. And they tend to impulse buy things that they don't really want or need quite often. So claiming that someone should just stop spending money is kind of like screaming at someone who has depression to just not be sad anymore. I mean, we all know it's that easy, right? So part of this exercise is teaching people how to be more aware of and in tune with their spending habits so that they can adjust those going forward to be a more intentional spender in the future. And then the next part of this comment that I found really interesting is that this person says they don't have enough time in the day to write down every item they think of buying because that in itself would be a full-time job, which seems to me like they must be thinking of impulse spending on a lot of things, which kind of goes against what they're saying in the first part of that statement. And I completely disagree with this person's claim that it takes a lot of time to keep an impulse spending journal, because I would say that it takes a couple seconds, maximum 1 minute, just to jot things down and take a few notes about what you're thinking of buying. And that really can help you learn a lot about yourself and your spending triggers. What I've learned after 40 years of experience is that good things take time And the more effort you're willing to put into something, the bigger the return that you're going to get in your change and your growth and your knowledge and experience. Another comment that I got is not spending money is not equivalent to saving money. Next time, you should actually save the money that you didn't spend. That would be really cool. So, this person isn't the only person who commented something like that. I actually got several comments from people who had the same kinds of thoughts. And I do get where these people are coming from. But I think what a lot of these people don't realize is that when I say that I didn't spend that money, I was actually also saving that money. And in fact, my husband and I have been saving 50 to 70% of our income for the past 15 years that we've been together. So that money I was talking about was just a portion of our savings and investments. Because not only do we save money each month, but we also invest that money to grow our wealth and build passive income. I think this is something that a lot of people in the frugal living community don't realize, which is that yes, it's great to save money, but if you're just saving that money and not doing anything else, then you're actually losing money because of inflation going up each year. And as we know, inflation is really, really high right now. So it's a really good idea to try to inflation proof whatever money you're saving. But reading that comment actually gave me this light bulb moment that we could add this to our low buy challenge to really level up and take up the ante and not just not spending money or not just saving money, but actually growing our money, which is why I decided that all of the money that I don't spend on these impulse purchases each month, I'm going to add to a brand new high yield savings account that I just opened with CIT Bank, which I know I've talked to you about before, and I absolutely love them. And then when you put your money in there, what you're doing is you're earning a higher amount than you would in just a regular savings account. And another great thing about HYSAs is they're FDIC insured up to $250,000. So one of the reasons that I settled on CIT Bank when I was comparing it to other banks is that they consistently have one of the highest APYs. And then also when I was comparing it to SoFi, which is the other one that I was really considering, CIT Bank doesn't have any monthly fees and it has pretty low opening deposits. But one of the cons is that you can't write checks from your high yield savings account. So that's a consideration if that's something that you want to do. But just to compare the APY at CIT Bank versus SoFi, right now the APY at CIT Bank is 4.3%. And the APY at SoFi is only 3.8%. So that's a pretty significant difference. And another thing to consider is that if you want to qualify for that 4.3 APY with CIT Bank, you have to have a balance of $5,000 or more. Otherwise, your APY is going to drop to 0.25%, which isn't much better than a regular savings account. So that's why I've decided that for the purpose of this challenge, I'm going to go ahead and deposit $5,000 into my CIT Bank account, this new account that I've started for the purpose of this challenge. And then throughout the rest of this no-buy challenge, I'm going to continue to keep track of how much I save, not impulse spending each month. And then at the end of the month, I will add that to my CIT Bank high yield savings account so that at the end of the year, we can tally all of that up and see how much I saved, not impulse spending, and how much putting that money that I didn't spend on impulse shopping into a high yield savings account ended up growing me over time throughout the course of the whole year. And if you're thinking of doing this challenge with me, one cool thing that CIT Bank has, which I can link down in the description box below, is that you can actually put in an amount that you want to deposit and then how much you're going to add to your account each month. And the CIT Bank savings account calculator will tell you how much you'll have saved at the end of that period. Now, APYs can fluctuate throughout the course of the year, so keep that in mind. And just because I'm telling you that certain rate right now doesn't mean that it'll be that way in a few months or a few years. Not sure when you're watching this video. But let's say that right now, I'm going to say that I'm putting in an initial deposit of $5,000, but I'm only going to track that over the course of 1 year. And I'm going to add their current APY, which is 4.3%. And then I'm going to assume that my monthly contribution is going to be, let's just say $1,000, because that's what it was the first month. And then it was over $2,000 in February. So let's just stick with $1,000 and see what that gets us. So I'm going to add an additional contribution of $1,000, and the frequency is per month that I'm adding it. So let's see what that gets us at the end of 1 year. So with a starting contribution of $5,000 and a total contribution of $12,000, which I would have to remove $2,000 of that actually because I've already finished January and February, so I wouldn't have $2,000 of that contribution, but let's just continue with this. I would earn a total interest amount of $460, meaning that my end balance at that time would be $17,460. And then obviously, if you add more money or if you extend the amount of time that you're investing in your high yield savings account, that could grow more and more. Now, I'm not suggesting that you only invest in a high yield savings account like this over the course of 10 years, because I do think that you need to be investing in other things like the stock market or real estate. But this is a good way to save towards short or midterm goals, such as things like putting a deposit on a house, or buying an engagement ring for your fiance, or maybe saving up money for your first child. So like I said, I will make sure to link to CIT Bank and the calculators that I found down in the description box below in case you want to check them out and you're interested in doing this high yield savings account challenge with me, along with this low by year or no by year, whatever you're doing. And if you haven't already, be sure and hit the subscribe button and turn on all notifications so that you don't miss the rest of the Low-Buy Diary videos that I'm going to be releasing at the end of each month, as well as so you can see the final total of how much I've saved up at the end of the year. I'm so excited for this. Hi there. Sorry for this little interruption, but this is Editing Marissa here, and I realized in the course of editing this video that at this point my microphone started doing something really, really weird, and there's some intermittent buzzing and crackling in the background when I'm speaking. I tried to edit it out as best I could, but please bear with me because I'd really like you to stick around to hear the rest of the facts and tips that I'm sharing, and I really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Another comment that I got on my last Low-Buy Diary video was this one that said, "You're not saving anything. Maybe you're just acting like a grown-up and not buying everything your spoiled brat self sees." And it didn't hurt my feelings, not at all, because that kind of comment doesn't bother me whatsoever anymore. It's just like water off the back of a duck. But what it did make me think about is, why is it so triggering for certain people to see other people talk about not spending money? I'm going to throw that out there. Things like minimalism and no buy challenges and low buy challenges, these are still pretty countercultural movements in our society of overconsumption and Shein hauls and Temu hauls. It's really interesting to me to hear when people get triggered by seeing people want to spend less and want to save money and openly talking about these things. And I guess that just goes to show you how taboo money is as a topic still in our society. And that's really one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do this video series, because I think we need to de-tabooify, if that's a word, the topic of money, and people being willing to open up and be transparent and have honest conversations about these things, I think is going to help demystify and make these things not so taboo. One really good question that I got on that video was how to set budgets for things like gifts and birthdays. This person commented, "Great video. That's a lot of money spent on a friend's birthday. Do you put a limit? Kids get invited to so many birthday parties nowadays." So what this person was talking about was, in my last video, I talked about how I had spent $50 on one birthday gift for one of my youngest son's friends. And then I think it was around like $35 on a second gift from when he went to another birthday party. So as a minimalist, yes, I'm setting a budget, and I think it's a pretty generous budget. But it's also more important for me to know that I'm getting that person, whether it be an adult or a child, a gift that I know that they're going to enjoy and use. And if they directly tell me they want a specific thing, I am all for that. So the budget threshold that I have for kids' gifts is $50. And obviously, I met that threshold with the first gift, but I was a little bit under it for the second one. But like I said, it's more important that I get a gift that I know that they're going to like versus spending a certain amount of money. And one of the reasons that we're able to have such a high budget is because we do cut our spending so much in other categories. But I could totally see if maybe you don't have the financial flexibility, setting a smaller budget amount, maybe $25, or even if you're someone who can hand make gifts, that is a really valuable skill that could save you a lot of money. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this section was how to budget for exception categories. I realized throughout the course of this no spend month that there are a lot of things that I do want to buy and that fit into our exception categories, but I didn't really have clear parameters on how much I wanted to spend on those things. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do a low buy versus a no buy, because I don't want to be miserable and I do want to be able to spend money on things that we enjoy and that add value to our life. So, what I did is I began writing out a wish list on my phone with all of these items that we're planning on buying in the months ahead. So be sure to tune in to next week's video because I'm going to talk about the things that I am spending money on as a minimalist this year, how I'm deciding how much to spend, and what you can take away for your low buy or no buy. And if you've made it this far, please be sure and give this video a like and go and check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks that you'll like, or I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye bye.